Hang
Yeah.
on.
So thank you. So thank you to everyone for joining us today on our Back to Business Basics webinar. We are recording this webinar, so just as a heads up, and we'll be sending out the notes as well as the resources as well as the slides. So whether you're a newbie to the 4 decisions and scaling up operating system, or like some of you that I know are on the call, someone who's been practicing and just wants a reminder or a reboot, or if you hear something 7 or 8 times, maybe it'll sink in. We're happy to have you today. We're going to take just a quick moment for introductions. I'm Cheryl Beth Cookler. I'm the founder and president of CEO Think Tank. We are celebrating our 25th year in business. This year, we've been in the small mid-market space for about 2 decades, partnering with CEOs and entrepreneurs and other C-level executives to help create and grow more valuable companies, as well as giving them back their time. I've been a certified scaling up coach since 2008, which is when I actually first met Vern Harnish, the author of Scaling Up, behind me. And I wanted to introduce my wing woman and partner in crime and an alum of our CEO Think Tank program, Jill Hunnelman, who's with me today. She's going to be co-presenting and managing slides. And thanks, Karen, for the shout out on the anniversary. I know it's been a long time. Jill is the founder and president of Learnia Training Solutions. It's an e-learning and education company for the past 20 years. And she's also a certified scaling up coach. So thanks to everyone for joining us. And again, please, put your questions, probably to keep us sort of in line, put your questions in the chat, but we can certainly engage in a little bit more of a verbal interaction as we go through the next hour and 20 minutes. So we have 3 learning objectives for you today, 3 promises that we want to make to you. The first is we want to review and help you understand a little bit better the 4 critical decisions that you need to be thinking about in order to grow your businesses profitably and sustainably. We also want to address and talk about the 3 barriers or 3 challenges to growth that Vern actually says if you can figure out how to overcome them, they can actually be your engine for growth. And then finally, introduce you to a roadmap to scale up your companies, as well as a robust operating system, which is designed to expedite execution and improve your cash flow and drive top and bottom line growth. You'll also get the access to the scaling up assessment for growth, which helps you to focus in on which one of the 4 decisions is your lead domino. You'll get access to our toolkit. And for 3 of you today, if you'd like, we wanted to give you the opportunity for a complimentary 45-minute consult, as well as a complimentary ticket. We're very excited that we'll be going live on October 7th with our fall leadership workshop with Greg Laterman. We're going to be talking about that a little bit later in the program, which we're actually also going to be live streaming. So you can actually come live if you'd like, or you can just join us via a live stream. So I think that's good for objectives. So what would be really helpful at this particular point is, as I talk about the issues, is for you to say what your particular issue is. So historically, we found that there are 3 areas where CEOs and C-level executives in the small and small mid-market space struggle the most. 3 challenges. Number 1 is they struggle to maintain their profitability as they grow. And they need to add people, they need to put in scalable infrastructure, and they can watch their profits leak away if they're not careful. The second area is that they have too many competing priorities and not enough resources, and they aren't really clear on which priority is the most important one as they look to accelerate their growth and create a more robust business. And finally, time after time, we find that CEOs and C-level executives in small companies struggle to hold people accountable to their commitments and to get them pulling in the same direction. And of course, with everything that's happened in the past a half. People have less time, they have less bandwidth, they have less executive functioning sometimes, and you all don't want to reinvent the wheel. And so giving you a process that could help you to deal with it. So our educated guess is that those of you who are on the call today, that are on the workshop today are struggling with one or more of these. So what's your issue? Is it around profitability and trying to scale your infrastructure and people? Is it around priorities? Is it around accountability? Or is it around something else? If you could say why you're here, what you need help with, and put that in the chat for us, that would be really helpful. So let's see what people come up with. Priorities. Thanks. Priorities and accountability. Great. Not necessarily great, but what about the rest of you? Hank and Joe, Stacy, Patty, conflicting priorities. Good. That's helpful. Others for us today? Adding the right people, yes. Hattie and Stacy, I don't see. Oh, Stacy said priorities and accountability. Hattie? Any others? Did we get Joe's yet? All right, so take a minute. If you need to think about it and get back to us, that's fine. And we'll go from here. Anyway, people. All right, great. So Joe, can you flip to the next?
Yep.
Next slide. So as we've said, there's really a wonderful thing about Vern Harnish's scaling up operating system is that he simplifies things for us. He really says there's only four key things, four key decisions that you need to think about when it comes to running and growing your companies. Just like the four legs of a table, but just like with restaurants, and if you go to a restaurant, you always end up with the short leg of the table that you're sticking sugar packets underneath. There's usually a short leg in the business that's really the critical lever, and if you can address that, you can really accelerate your growth. And that's the leg that we want to be thinking about today, and particularly for those of you that are struggling around figuring out what should be the most important priorities. So in order to help you, we just wanted to get you starting to think about some questions that you might have, and then Jill will go further into each of the four decisions. So the first question is around people. And one of the key questions that we like to ask around people is, would you enthusiastically rehire all of the people that are in your company? If you write down folks that you're interacting with, whether it's your employees, whether it's your suppliers, whether it's your customers, would you enthusiastically rehire them, or would you enthusiastically re-engage with them? Are your stakeholders actively engaged? Or do you maybe have a partner issue or an employee who's mucking up the attitudes of others? Is there a key position in your organization that you're missing, that you need somebody for? Are you having trouble attracting employees, or you just can't find enough of the right people? If so, people may be your short leg. And this is a critical decision for a lot of small companies because you've only got limited people in order to get the work done. The next area to think about is your strategy. So are your gross margin dollars growing as quickly as you'd like, which means that you have something that people want and are willing to pay for. If you don't, if your revenue, your top line revenue is erratic or not predictable, you may have a strategy issue. Then we talk about execution, getting things done. So have you increased your revenue, but your net profitability has dropped? Or are you spending more time working in the business than on the business? Or is there a lot of drama in the business because people don't understand what they need to do, or communication has suffered? Again, that could be a major problem with the pandemic and with COVID. Do you have an accountability problem? I think Stacy's already talked about accountability with people getting it done. Do people not understand what's expected of them? You may have an execution problem. And finally, you can have great people, a decent strategy, pretty good execution, but you can't get by a day without cash. And it's not just about making your payroll, it's about having the cash reserves on hand to take advantage of unforeseen opportunities and challenges presented by something like the pandemic. So as you think about these 4 decisions, people and an engaged workforce, strategy and increasing top line growth, priorities, getting things done, good execution practices, or cash, what do you think yours is now? What would you predict your short leg is? Struggling with priorities, because everything is a priority, and accountability. And for those of you that are saying that priorities are your issue, it may be execution. Yes, for sure. So think about it. Is it people? Is it strategy? For Stacy, who's got priorities and accountability, what's the question? What's the big one? Is it that execution issue, or is it people because you don't have the right people on the bus? Take a minute and write it in the chat if you can.
Need more people. Yeah.
Yep. Need more people. Yep. All right. Who else? Struggling with strategy and execution, working in the company, right? Not on it. How would you get a capacity? Ah, that's a good question, Karen. Yeah, there's this interesting dichotomy between capacity of having enough people and actually afford to pay for people as well. Better execution, considering that people change. Yeah, Jim Collins has some great stuff to say about people, that if we have the right people on the bus means that the right people don't have to be managed. And I think that's one of the things that a lot of small companies are grappling with today is around that people decision, because they don't have the right people. Who else? Very hard in these times. Will I get someone better? Yep. And role definition. Yes, Karen, absolutely. Scorecards, and Jill's going to be talking about that.
Yeah.
All right, cool. This is very helpful. So I will pass the baton over to Jill so that we can dig a little bit to each of these and give you some resources to start thinking about. Frivolous execution out of.
Yep.
We'll read it. Yep.
Role definition. Yeah, Karen, I think I would agree with you that the whole capacity question is around, do you have the right people doing the right things with the right priorities, right? So it's that balance between the two. And in my mind, it's about always revisiting what are the priorities given this ever-changing, wonderful world we're in right now, especially with all the COVID implications. So, okay, good. So I'm kind of going to be multitasking here. So if I look over here, my other screens here, please don't take that personally. But one of the things I wanted to walk through just in this next section of the webinar is really to walk through a quick assessment that might help you pinpoint more specifically the pain points of what your short leg may be, whether it's people, strategy, execution, or cash. And this is actually on Cheryl Beth's website, ceothinktank.com. Like, you can also take the scaling assessment there or share that with other people. If you know of other business owners who are also kind of trying to figure out where they should focus their attentions. But I want to walk through this assessment with all of you today. So if you can grab a piece of paper and a pen, we're actually going to do this. And I'm going to ask you what your number is once we're done, because you actually have to rank yourself on 10 different questions and then tally up your number to get a final kind of number that will help us determine how well you're doing with your business here. So does everyone have a pen and a piece of paper? I got 10 questions for you. And this is an assessment of what we call the 4D. It's the 4D, 4 decision assessment. Again, helping you determine your short leg. I'm going to have you rank your company on a scale of 1 to 5. on the following statements, and then we'll tally them up. So 5, if you rank it, your company a 5, it means that you strongly agree with the statement. And if you rank your company a 1, meaning you strongly disagree with the statement. So why don't we kind of walk through this? The first question I have for you is that we have a clear sense of our key differentiators and win deals more often than we lose. So kind of rate your company, scale of 1 to 5. Second question is, we have a clearly articulated vision or a big, hairy, audacious goal written and understood by our employees, and that goal drives people forward with excitement. Third question, we gather feedback on an ongoing basis from our customers and employees to improve the company. We're going to be talking about that one a little bit later too today. Fourth question, we have the right people in the right seats with key accountabilities and targets defined for success in their jobs. So everyone understands how they can get an A. Okay. Fifth question, we have core values, which we use to attract, hire, and engage our employees, and have created a solid virtual bench of candidates as a result. Sixth question, we have a cash reserve, or what we call a core capital account, of 2 to 3 months of operating expenses. Seventh question, we have plenty of time to plan for the company because we do such little firefighting. 8, we review our most important metrics, key performance indicators, daily and weekly to make sure things are running on time and on target. 9, we have a written business plan that we use to direct our activities on a weekly basis. And 10, we regularly accomplish most of what we set out to accomplish, including hitting or exceeding our targeted numbers. Okay, so make sure you rank each of these questions 1 to 5, and then let's see how you did. So take a minute, go ahead and score your assessment by adding up all the numbers that you have. So I'll give you like a couple seconds here to do that. And I'll tell you what your score means here. So if you score 40 to 50, it looks like you're generally doing well. And there may be opportunities to elevate your performance, but you might be doing a lot of things well. If you score 30 to 40, it looks like you may be right on track, but there's definitely going to be room for improvement in some of these areas, which we'll talk about in a minute. And then if you score less than 30, then you may be taking a significant risk with your business. And we would definitely recommend that you invest some time to better understand why. So if everyone can put their number in the chat, that would be awesome. There's no judgment. We're all here to kind of learn and figure out where we're at. So great.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Wow, that's good, Joe. 42.
I was going to say, Hetty, you got 65. That'd be amazing. Because you can only get 50. This is great. Good. Awesome.
He's skimming.
Okay. So you might have kind of guessed here, but some of the questions are stacked a little bit. So in the assessment, we had, that's all right, Hetty, I know. I do the same thing. So we had 3 strategy questions in the assessment, 2 people, really 1 cash, and then 4 execution questions. So the companies that are most well positioned for success, that are growing sustainably, profitably, and predictably, and have good maybe execution disciplines, like those are typically getting 4s and 5s on these questions, right? So if you're not getting a 4 or 5 on the questions, then that might be an indicator of where your short leg is, in what decision you might want to focus. So can you guys put in the chat, like, where were your 2s, your 1s, your 2s? Like what area was that?
Yeah, I'd be curious, Joe, with you. I mean, you have a pretty high score with 42. I'd be curious where you're underscoring.
Yeah, right. Or where were your lowest scores here?
Yep.
And then what we're going to do is just go through each of these and provide some tools that might help you address some of those issues that might be happening in each of your short legs. Strategy, execution, people. Good. Yep.
Right. Karen.
Awesome.
Stacy, where's your short leg? Number 2 and number 9. Yeah.
Okay. Strategy, execution. Okay, good. That's great. I don't think cash came up. That's really interesting. All this. All right, good. So let's kind of walk through each of these areas, and these are the questions, or these are the reasons, and I'll start with people, and then we'll go through each one, but why people might be your short leg. So take a minute and read through these questions for a minute. Because if people's your short leg, there's a couple tools that you can use to help start addressing your people challenges.
And part of the reason that we call these back to business basics is because really they are the basics. But, you know, in the whirlwind that is business today and life today, we have a tendency to forget.
Yeah.
We're here to remind you of things you probably already know, but we're just here to remind you and nudge you gently in that direction.
Yeah. So there's a couple tools with people, if people's your short leg here. And I'll just put in some color commentary here, especially with COVID and the great resignation and the great reshuffling and all the terms you want to, call it, where people are kind of leaving companies, or you might be in a industry where talent's really hard to find right now because we have more demand than maybe supply at this point. There's a couple things you can do to help with this. One of the tools that we often talk about is what we call a functional accountability chart. And what this is it's a tool that helps identify the people and who's accountable for what functions in your business. And a function's not the same as a job title. A function, really, you may refer to it as business lines or departments, but it really is identifying all those functions, who the one person that's ultimately accountable for that function, what are the KPIs that they also, and we try and be specific around leading key performance indicators versus lagging, that really help drive results, and the results that you can see on a profit and loss statement or a balance sheet statement. Like a lot of companies that have strong disciplines around this will actually assign per line on the P&L or balance sheet to an actual person. And so this is an exercise that we do with organizations. It's good to do this. I always look at it once a quarter just in case there's changes in the market, changes in the company, changes in our strategy. Like this goes back to Cheryl Beth's point, this is around basics. It's making sure that everyone knows who's accountable for what. Or if you have people that are wearing multiple hats, that at least you recognize that because that goes into maybe helping them prioritize what they should be focusing on if they have or are accountable for a couple of different functions in the organization. So has anybody done this exercise before? I'm just curious. And do they do it on an ongoing basis at all?
Yeah, because there's some of you that I'm sure have done this before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the critical piece with this is it needs to get back to what do you expect from each of these positions so that everybody's clear around what's expected. And I think some of you have said that that's one of the issues that you're struggling with a little bit, is that people may not know what's expected now.
Yeah. Yeah. And having the right people to also be able to execute on your strategy and have the right execution disciplines in place is important. I've worked this exercise with a couple of different organizations, and it just brings clarity where maybe a strategy is to grow a certain service offering within your company. And then when you realize you've had people changes in that function, well, who's ultimately accountable for that? It's just a very simple thing, but sometimes it just helps bring clarity on what maybe a root cause problem might be. So I would say do this. If you haven't done this, this might be an exercise that you want to do as a takeaway from today. Okay, the other key resource that I love I'm not gonna hide my bias here, are scorecards, and it's regardless of what size you are as an organization. But I believe each position in your organization should have a scorecard, and that's different than a job description. So a job description is great, listing all the responsibilities for a particular position, and you use those to hire people. But at the end of the day, a scorecard is all about results and what are the outcomes that you want from that position. I actually use scorecards to hire people. So, and to also hold people accountable. We set outcomes that we want for the year, have monthly coaching calls, like with the leadership team on what's happening with the results that are required of their position. And then also the scorecards can also include any strategic business objectives that you're trying to focus on in the short term or the long term. So whereas job descriptions are great for, getting the word out about who you might want to hire, scorecards are all about, this is what I want done this year from a leadership perspective. And how are we doing against those results at the end of the day? So I would say if you're having an accountability issue, or even that conflict between priorities with your people, I would do a scorecard, because scorecards are also dynamic. They are not static like a job description. So you can update these and have the conversations with your key players, with your people in the organization. And that way everybody's aligned on what they really should be focusing on for it. So how many of you have scorecards for each of the positions in your company? Can I ask? Does anybody have scorecards?
Give us a head. Yes, no.
No? Okay, Stacy, yep.
How about the rest of you? I know Karen said she might have a people execution. Joe, yep, no, yeah.
Yep.
All right, we have your homework.
Oh my God, this is like such an impactful thing to do. And you usually, with a scorecard, you identify best practices just to identify 8 to 10 outcomes per position. It's not everything. It's like, it's kind of like, these are the key things that we want you to focus on. And they have to be, each of the items on your scorecard should be SMART, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time bound. SMART. And so, and then talked about at least on a monthly basis. We have some other kind of execution best practices with scorecards that I can talk about later in the execution pieces. And we actually have samples of scorecards, right? Like maybe Cheryl Beth to share with the 3 people that reach out to us right after this. Happy maybe to share some information with you on this.
Karen had a question about, do we feel scorecards are fair to implement for those who are involved in a capacity constraint? I mean,
Yeah.
I would say absolutely, Karen, like getting people to sit down, even if it's just for 30 minutes and saying, here's the couple of things that I think I'm accountable for, right? And how I'm being measured. And then having a conversation with that person about, wow, like, yeah, you do have a lot of, like, what are the most important things?
Yeah. I had a CEO, Karen, I was working with, and he was wondering why there wasn't getting a lot of traction in one of his kind of departments. And I said, well, what's on her scorecard? And then he realized it was a person who was splitting HR responsibilities with running a warehouse. And I said, okay, you can't have it all. Like what do you need if you want to offer her the ability to do multiple hats? What's a realistic expectation on the outcomes for each of those functions that she's ultimately overseeing at this point, and put it on her scorecard so that there's alignment and so that everybody knows, given the constraint of time and what we're trying to get done in an organization with less people doing more, what really they're responsible for that's realistic, and have that conversation. I would say this is the key to help get clarity around capacity constraints, honestly.
Well,
awesome. Thanks, Karen. Okay. So the other thing with kind of people, here's some where you can find more information about scorecards. There's a book called Top Grading. And this is Bradford Smart. Bye, Hetty. I know you need to drop off for a business call. We'll join later again. Okay, we look forward to seeing you after your call. But there's this book is all about like the right talent strategies. And then his son, Jeff Smart, actually wrote the book Who. And this has all the information on scorecards. It also talks about best strategies for finding how to find talent, how to interview, how to select, how to source, how to select, how to hire good talent. So if you are having issues with finding the right people too, maybe going through your interviewing process and understanding the use of scorecards in that process would be really helpful for you. So I think those might be 2 resources to check out.
plus one of the things that we just found this with a recent client that's having to hire about a dozen people, is that they actually just hired a VP of Ops and a VP of HR who got offers from the companies that they were at as sort of a counter. And both of them ended up going with our client, in part because they were so impressed with their interview process and the idea of the fact that they were using scorecards, and they were coming into a company where they actually knew what was expected of them and how their performance would be rated. So using this type of robust process gives you a leg up when it comes to attracting the right folks.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Okay. And then another tool that you might want to know is out there, which is, this is what Cheryl Beth was talking about earlier today. A guy named Greg Lederman, he does awesome work on like employee engagement. I've used some of his tools also in other businesses, but he's speaking on October 7th, and we have the information and the link that we'll send out after this webinar. But it's all best practices on how to engage with your workforce to drive productivity. So that's coming up with it. So that might help with your people engagement if that's part of your people short leg. I'm for it. Okay, cool. Can we go on to strategy?
You guys ready? Since some of you had strategy issues too.
Yeah. So strategy may be your short leg if you can't answer yes to these questions, these 3. So take a look at those. So this is all about driving revenue, driving gross margins. If you're looking to scale your business over time, or even as an exit strategy looking to sell, you want your revenues and your gross margins to be going up. You don't want them to, be going like that. And that's all around, do you have an offering that people are willing to pay a good price for at the end of the day? So if you're having difficulties with growing revenues, gross margins, then here's some tools for that. The first is, and this is basic stuff here, but it's to do a SWT, a little different than an SWOT, which keeps people into the weeds. This helps keep the conversations about your business more at a macro level and strategic level. But it's really to identify what your strengths are as an organization, your weaknesses, meaning things that are unlikely to change, not can we fix it? It's unlikely to change, that you have to manage around. And then what are the trends that are out there that are impacting your company, and where you might want to pivot or change so that you're solving ultimately a problem out there, right, for your customers. Normally we say revisit this once a year, but in our world of pandemic, we're saying at least 6 months. And then if there's big changes that are impacting you, then you might want to do it at your quarterly meetings. But at the end of the day, it's a minimum kind of once a year for it. So, and you shouldn't have more than 6 items in each of these boxes. So we're not talking a dissertation here, but it's more about how can we leverage our strengths and our core competencies to meet a customer need. How do we manage around the weaknesses in our organization so we don't get pulled back into, always trying to, work around a weakness in an inefficient way? How can we be proactive about that? And then again, what are those bigger trends that might come along and sweep us away that we're going to have to work with here? So, okay. And then Cheryl Beth, I'll have you talk about this one.
Yeah. So one of the things that we find, there's a lovely saying from the strategizers group, which is the answers are not in the building. The answers to your strategy, the answers to your revenue growth are outside in the market. And so having a real clear understanding of how the market has shifted. If you haven't done the strengths, weaknesses, trends, and you're saying, I really should do that, we'd encourage you to reach outside. And so back in the last downturn, back in 2008, one of our alumni clients, David Raymond, who is the president and founder of Raymond Entertainment, you may know him as the original Philly fanatic, discovered some fascinating facts when he reached out to his clients. I mean, he recognized at the time that he was going to really have to shift because his main business was actually designing and developing mascots. So he actually had a product, and they had colleges, they had universities, they had professional teams that they were developing mascots for. And he wanted to be proactive because he recognized that they might be cutting back on investing in mascots. And so we gave him an assignment to reach out to 30 of his clients. And actually, Dave was the one who he's very competitive, as you could imagine. He was the one who set the bar, and he says, I want to talk to 30 of our customers in 30 days. And we asked him, we said, you really think that's reasonable? And he said, absolutely. One a day, I can do that. He said, give me the questions. So the questions that we gave him were right out of the Roar book, another resource we can point your way, is what do you find most valuable about what we do for you and why? So it's a two-parter. And actually, Karen, this gets to your compelling need and obvious solution that Karen Kopp actually talks about in her sales training. So why are people buying from you? What need or challenge or issue are they having that is causing them to need to buy from you? If there was one thing that we could do to change and make a modification to what we're doing, what would it be? And then the last piece is there anything else that you feel like would be important for us to know about you or share? Is there another issue that you're having? So what are those top 3 reasons why people are actually buying from you? And David was really surprised because what he found out was, first of all, they appreciated the mascots themselves, but what they really appreciated was his guidance and advice and ideas about how to be a better mascot. And the second thing that he found out was that in addition to those ideas, it was really the ideas around how their mascots could help them to generate revenue. And then finally, the last thing he found out was that he needed to do more investment in training. And so coming out of all of the conversations, his 30-day march, as it were, was he launched what he called his mascot boot camp, where he would actually train mascots. And this ended up becoming a reoccurring form of revenue for him. So every year, the folks that were his clients would send their mascots to mascot boot camp. So they could not just learn how to be a better mascot, but they could actually also learn help these organizations to generate revenues. So our questions for you is, how many of you have done this recently in the last month, in the last year, and over the summer? How many of you have actually called up your folks and said, hey, I just want to talk to you and get a little bit of information? How many of you have said, hey, I've got a problem I'd really like your help with? How many of you are actually tracking your customer contacts and your customer conversations that you're making on a weekly basis or a monthly basis? How many of you are having your employees track the number of contacts that they're making? And then are you sitting down on some frequency, whether it's weekly, once a day, once a month, and asking, what have we learned from the market? You know, we've talked to 5 or 6 clients over the past few weeks. What are we learning about the market? What are the issues that they're having? What are the struggles that they're having? What have we learned about what we're doing? And I love Deb Gabor. We'll be talking about her in a minute, where she says, how can we be indispensable? So in the chat, for those of you that are thinking about this, how many of you have done this? How many of you have made it a point on a weekly or monthly basis to reach out to customers and have customer conversations? Yes, no, a little bit. And if you can just put that in the chat. Yes, no, some, Karen, good. Did it originally? Yes. Ah, Joe, there's another one.
Yeah.
This is where strategy comes from. Is from
Yeah.
what the market needs now. Karen, Joe, Hank, how about you? Have you been chatting with your folks, your clients, Stacy?
Yeah, because your customer's world could have changed dramatically in the last year and a half. So it's like, well,
Too infrequently. Yeah. Yeah, and unfortunately, this is one that is going to take a little bit of time to do, but this is, along with having clear expectations of your employees, having customer conversations on some type of frequency, regular frequency, and then looking at the data is critical to driving revenue consistently. Yeah, but on a limited basis. Yep. Okay, good. You're in the process of implementing. Good. Great, Stacey. That's good. All right.
Good. There's one more resource just with strategy that might be helpful. And this is on the CEO Think Tank website here. But it's all about brand, and Deb Gabor did a great webinar on how to reinvent your brand for the post-pandemic world, that there's a replay on the website here. But it's always good to ask yourself now, what are your real key differentiators, and how they might have changed right, for your customers. So it's kind of like it's to be a good thing maybe to go and check out if you're also looking about your marketing and your branding strategies. Some things you might want to consider there. So, so with strategy, you can do an SWT. You can go and talk more with your customers, which is kind of the seeds for, again, what your value proposition may be, or those key differentiators that differentiate you from your competition. And then to help explain that or broadcast that, look into kind of the, irrational loyalty or the resources around marketing and branding to kind of get that word out. So, okay, awesome. So that's strategy. Can we move on to execution? All right, so execution, here's your key questions. And execution could be your short leg if you can't answer yes to these questions. So execution is all about net profitability, strong communication and alignment across teams, and then prioritization, right? So there's a few tools that can help you with prioritizing and reducing the amount of unnecessary drama that can be occurring in your company. Does anybody have any drama out there? I like that. All right, but here's number one here. So this is an easy thing. Again, simple, back to basics here, but it's have you identified what the company priorities are, and make sure that everyone on your leadership team or within your company knows what they are, who's accountable for them. And then you can simply have a very simple status dashboard, like we're on track, we're going to hit this priority, or it's at risk, we need some help, or right now it's not going to happen. Oh, look at that. We eliminated the source of drama 3 weeks ago and it feels so good, doesn't it? Drama is like such a huge time suck. And so the things we can do to eliminate kind of the drama is important. So if you haven't taken the time just to write down what your company priorities are for for the remainder of this year, and then, we are in September. This is where I usually start to think about, well, what should my priorities for next year be for the organization? And you can kind of, use this tool as a way to jot that down. These are company priorities, and then that usually help move the organization forward, right? You're not stuck in the urgent all the time. So if you're doing firefighting all the time, you might want to think about what are the company priorities that are going to move your organization forward of where you need to get to. And then from that, you can identify what the individual priorities are. And this is great for your leadership team. It's really great for anybody in your company. But what are those priorities? Do they map to the company priorities? And some won't. Some will be position priorities that people need to understand are real priorities. And you can have them report out to their managers. You can have your leadership team report out on a weekly basis, like we're good on, getting these priorities kind of done and addressed. The best practice, so one of the things that we really love are level 10 meetings. You can actually go to YouTube and type in level 10, and there's a video that you can watch about what makes a good level 10 meeting. And it gives you the structure for a weekly meeting that you can have with your leadership team. And one of the things that's in that level 10 meeting is like a 5-minute, rapid round where people report up on, their individual priorities and whether they're on track or not. So there's a way that you have to make sure through your meeting rhythms that you're actually talking about these things. It doesn't do any good to write them down and stick them in a drawer and never look at them again. You have to embed them into your your meeting rhythms. So, and then this is just another slant, another version of this, which is in every quarter is 13 weeks. And because Cheryl Beth likes to say we are pressure prompted, a lot of us, we need kind of a deadline. A lot of people do in order to get things done. So every quarter is a 13-week race. So what are individuals' KPIs? What's the critical numbers they should be focusing on there? And then the quarterly priorities for the position. So again, just tools that help with prioritization, alignment, and reducing drama ultimately. Because if everybody knows what they're accountable for, that goes a long way. So how many of you have company priorities written down for the rest of the year? What the company priorities are?
For the fourth quarter, or you had them at the beginning of 2021, we'll give you credit. How many of you have priorities written down? Yes, no, just give us a yes or a no or a maybe. I do. Yes, Joe. Good.
Joe.
Hank and Stacy, yes.
Yes. No. Okay.
There are too many.
So
3 to 5, Joe.
3 to 5 is the best practice. Are you laughing there? There are too many. Yeah. But we would say have 3 to 5 priorities, and then just make sure everyone's aligned on what those are. Okay, cool. All right, last short leg, everybody. Just watching my time here too. Cash is, and nobody had this as a short leg, but we'll just kind of reinforce that these are the key questions you want to answer. So if you said yes to any of these, then cash might be an issue. We're kind of big advocates of having 2 to 3 months of operating expenses. Even some people put it in a separate account that's liquid and it doesn't include your line of credit. It's a way that you can use that to take advantage of unforeseen opportunities or to weather kind of, storms that may come your way, like the COVID storm right now. And then also being able to predict your cash flow 2 to 3 months out, and then understanding your cyclical nature, if your business does have cycles, just to understand what that is. But one of the tools that we have is something called a cash acceleration strategy. So it really is about there's 4 main business cycles that every business has. They have a sales cycle, production cycle, delivery cycle, and a billing and payment cycle. And it's to look at those and ask, all right, are there things we can do to shorten those cycle times? Are there things we can do to eliminate mistakes in each of those cycles? And are there things we can do maybe to improve the overall business model of how we get things done within each of those cycles? Because sometimes we keep doing the same things in a business. And we might want to pop our heads up and say, well, is there technology that can help us? Are there better, more efficient ways that we can be doing this, given the times? And to be able to, because if you shorten those cycle times, that honestly can help improve your cash flow, which ultimately can help you get to maybe a 2 to 3 months reserves of your operating expenses. So this is something that you can look at, whether it's quarterly or 6 months or once a year. Again, pulling yourself out of the weeds to focus kind of on the business of getting your cash flow in hand here. The other thing to look at is there's a webinar and some videos from a man named Greg Crabtree, who wrote the book Simple Numbers, Big Profits. This is a great book that looks at cash from a strategic perspective versus a tax accounting perspective. So how can you look at your numbers to help you make strategic decisions in your company? And this is a great book. It's small, so you'd be able to read this hopefully in a quick way. But there's some great ideas in here for how to look kind of at your cash. Okay. So those are kind of the cash tools, the cash acceleration strategy. But since nobody had that as a short leg, I'm not going to dwell on it here. But I do want to kind of recap the whole thing. Or Cheryl Beth, do you want to do this, or do you want me to?
Yeah,
walk
sure.
through?
No, absolutely. So again, one of the most important things that we continue to find, and Vern actually said this earlier this week on a webinar that I was listening to, is you've got to take time, even if it's just an hour, like an hour on, go to a coffee shop on a Friday afternoon, or take some time. Jill actually always organizes her weeks, like Monday morning. I have a tendency to do this type of work on a Sunday afternoon, and just think about what those most important decisions are, and maybe go back to the basics. So if people is your short leg, and some of you said that that was certainly an issue, like take out the functional accountability chart and spend a few minutes doing it. Or revisit your scorecards, set aside a couple of hours, maybe do a working lunch with your folks, your team, and you can all work on your scorecards together. That might not be a bad thing to do. And bring them to the Greg Laterman webinar, or do join us live stream. We'll be live streaming that as well. You can either come to Villanova University or join live stream, and then have a conversation about what did you learn. If strategy is a short leg, no matter what, go talk to your market, go have those customer conversations. Do a 30-day plan like Dave Raymond did. And then at the end of the month, say, what did we learn? What have we learned about the market? How can we be indispensable? What do our customers appreciate about us? Where could we get better, or where could we improve? Around execution, make sure, the key to good execution is having the right people in the right seats. So if you are having, like Stacy said, if somebody was a source of drama, that's taking up bandwidth that you could be doing other things with. And then again, sitting down for an hour or two and saying, what do our priorities need to be? What are the one or two things that I really need to focus on? You've still got 100 days left in 2021. So we'd encourage you to get clear about what those priorities are going to be, what those rocks, as we like to say, are going to be from now until December 31st, and take advantage of the 15-week race that we've got coming up. And finally, you might want to just check out the cash acceleration strategy exercise, or just go to CEO Think Tank's website and take a look at Greg Crabtree's workshop. That's there. You can skip the first hour. The first hour is sort of a rehash of COVID, and just focus in on getting your financials in place. So here's our commitment time. So what are you going to focus on? Like, as we've gone over it, we spent the last 45 minutes talking. What's the one thing that you're going to commit to do? It is September 10th today. Between now and the end of September, let's give you a week. So between now and next Friday, the 17th, what's one thing that you're willing to commit to? Please put it in the chat. Just one thing. Customer engagement. Good job, Hank. Thank you. Yes, reaching out and talking to customers. That would be great. Joe, Karen, and Stacy, what are you committing to? Company priorities. Yep, there you go. Yeah, I mean, and scorecards would be really helpful, Stacy, on that one. Major customer my top 10. Good. Yep. Scorecard for capacity. Yes. Good job, Karen. Well done. Cool. So again, we said that we would be happy to sit down with you all and have a complimentary consulting session. So Worksheets will be available. Yes, the worksheets are available. We'll be sending those out to you, Stacy, so that you can do them. And as we said, you can, they're actually open source. Most of them are available, I think, at scalingup.com, but we'll send that to you in our follow-up email as well. Good. Great. All right. So we have everybody, Karen and Joe and Stacy and Hank, right?
Yep.
All right. So we have 2 additional resources for you, things to think about, with the risk of giving you too much information, which Jill knows I'm sometimes guilty of. We have found that in our work with small and mid-market companies, that stories paint 1,000 words. So we have a couple of stories that we're going to talk to you about in the context of the challenges of growth, and specifically the 3 barriers to growth, and how some of our clients have overcome those barriers, leveraging the 4 decisions and their scaling up and the scaling up operating system. So let's talk about why those barriers exist. And here's the deal. As you add people to your company, you create complexity. So as a startup with just, a couple of people, you've basically just got 2 channels of communication, 2 degrees of complexity. And, that can be anybody who's been involved with a significant other or in a partnership knows that can be complicated just all by itself. But as you start to add people, unfortunately, the level of complexity becomes an exponential issue. The degree of complexity triples from 2 to 6. You add a 4th person, it quadruples to 24. And even though you've only expanded the team by 33%, exponentially your challenges have increased. The great thing is that there's actually a tool that helps you to understand how to handle those challenges as you grow. And it's called the 7 stages of growth. It actually comes from a book that was written back in 2004, 2005 by James Fisher, called Navigating the Growth Curve. He basically studied over 600 companies, entrepreneurial companies, and it helps. And then he developed a model that identified not just the issues that arise, but also what should be your number 1 priority. So this is a little bit like the answer to some of the questions that you might have been having. And we love it because it's real. It's very, very real. And it identifies what you need to focus on. So if you have a 35-person organization, which means you're going from the delegation stage to the professional stage, you're actually transitioning from a people priority where you should be being focused on that people decision to a process or an infrastructure priority or execution priority. So as you look at this model, what stage are you at? Are you at the startup? You've got someplace between 0 and 10 employees. Are you a ramp up, someplace between 11 and 19? Have you grown to 20 employees and so you're above delegation, or are you into the professional area? Can you put that in the chat? Like where are you on this? Stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, 4. Yep. Yeah, and so some of the execution issues that you're having, Joe, would make a lot of sense. Stacy, you've talked about people and accountability. Karen, 3, yep, same thing, people, right? The great thing with this model is that it helps to, it gives you a sanity check. It helps, I constantly find people looking at this model and saying, oh yeah, that's me. But it also helps you be a bit proactive, because one of the issues with growth is that if you don't address, so if you're growing from stage 2 to stage 3 or from stage 3 to stage 4, and you haven't addressed the issues at the earlier stage, they will haunt you. So if you've gone from 3 to 4 and you didn't address your people issues, you've got to go back and address your people issues before you address your process issues. And same thing with going from ramp up to delegation. If you haven't addressed your profitability issues when you were at stage 2, they will haunt you when you go to stage 3. I could use a sanity check. Good. Well, hopefully this is giving you one, Joe.
It is.
Hank, where are you? What stage are you at? I haven't seen that yet. In your growth. You put it in.
3.
Great, there you go. Yeah, that delegation to professional, that's a real challenge, right there, because you go from people and profit to process and profit. And that is where we find that 35 employees, that's actually where things start to get pretty complicated.
Yeah.
So let's just revisit the barriers. A lot of you have looked at scaling up. I know you've read Scaling Up. You know this, but again, we're here to remind you of things that you might have learned along the way, but might have forgotten. That these barriers to growth actually come out of small business studies that have been done and have been published in the Harvard Business Review. So if you want that resource, we can send it to you. But it comes down to people and lack of leadership. Like, does your company have the ability to attract and retain and grow enough leaders through the organization who have the capabilities to delegate and manage and predict? And for a small company, sometimes that means you've got to go out and hire them as opposed to develop them internally because you just don't have the time. The second barrier to growth is the ability to create scalable infrastructure and processes. In other words, designing and implementing the systems and processes. It could be a technology process, it could be a communication process, it could be a coaching process, your customer and your buyer journey. Those types of scalable infrastructure to handle complexities that will just get more complex as you grow. And then finally, the last barrier to growth, Vern always starts with this, is market dynamics and being able to address the market proactively. We always say market dynamics will make you look brilliant or they'll make you look ignorant. And the fact that you've got to stay in touch with your market, as we talked about earlier with the Philly Fanatic and getting out and talking to folks. We really encourage you, if you haven't done a strengths, weaknesses, and trends in the last 6 months, to revisit that and make that a priority in the next 30 days. Get in touch with your market. How has it shifted? What did you use? What were you used to? What baggage did you have that you need to let go of? And then going forward, what do you need to do differently or increase in order to be profitable going into 2022? The really great thing is when you address these barriers, the anchor that you've been dragging turns into the wind at your sails. Like that these barriers actually can become, as we said earlier, the growth engine that will accelerate your growth and drive profitability and drive top line growth. So Jill and I wanted to share a couple of stories with you that hopefully will illustrate that. And again, you can definitely check out more of these stories on CEO Think Tank's website. We've got lots of stories about companies that have dealt with the barriers to growth. But we wanted to focus on two, a for-profit and a not-for-profit. So the one company that we've had it's just been amazing working with Mia Gallison. She started Ebu, which is a boutique woman-owned business over 20 years ago. And at the beginning of last year, at the beginning of 2020, she and her team had grown her New York-based business that's in Manhattan to an $8 million global company, selling mainly through specialty and targeted box stores. She had slow and steady growth. She had lined up with her initial mission of women-owned, mother-run, and sustainably sourced. And she had toyed, no pun intended, with the idea of going direct to consumer. She was really reluctant to pursue it. Like many small entrepreneurial businesses, her processes and systems were informal. Her team was energetic and hardworking, but without a lot of experience in formal training, and their execution, and therefore their profitability, was starting to suffer. She had actually started to implement Scaling Up as an operating system through the C200 program, which is a women's leadership group. But she was looking to scale to 20 million in revenue, and she realized that she needed more hands on in a much more customized approach. So she reached out at the end of 2019 to us and brought us on board to not just educate her team, but to help her really accelerate the implementation of scaling up. And that ended up being, of course, the perfect storm. They were at the epicenter of the pandemic, being in New York City. They were one of the first to go into lockdowns back in March of last year. And even though the world changed overnight, Mia said, you know what, this is important to spend time doing. And so she ended up being our first virtual client with scaling up. They started holding virtual educational meetings in order to learn the system. They started implementing the one-page strategic plan. They implemented a direct-to-consumer business model in about 30 days, maybe 45, working with her warehouses to manage inventory, update the website. The operating system helped them keep the team on track, even though they were working remotely. They started working on their scorecards and their management accountability plans. They started holding their weekly level 10 tactical meetings, as well as their daily huddles. They worked their butts off, to say it nicely. But as a result, they launched the direct-to-consumer channel. They grew the business by over 50%. They improved their profitability dramatically. And they grew their customer base and their reputation. And more recently, because they recognized that leadership was a critical barrier that they needed to address, they brought on a director of operations, as well as a chief marketing officer, and are extremely well positioned, have made dramatic improvements in their business in the last 6 months, and are definitely on track to reach her $20 million in revenue goal. Jill, do you want to talk a little bit about Opportunity House?
Yep. So this is the nonprofit example. This is an organization actually out in Berks County in Pennsylvania. They're the largest nonprofit out there, and they provide emergency shelter, permanent and temporary housing. They have a large learning center for kids that are below the poverty line. And I started working with them actually back in May of 2020 when the pandemic hit. Same thing. But the reason they were looking for strategic planning and help was, at the time, they had an $800,000 line of credit that never got below $700,000 over the last decade. And they were getting to the point where the bank was going to call their loan, with their line of credit with it. And they had average monthly payables about $200,000. They had 75 people in the organization. And so they also had a retail thrift store because they were trying to run things more like a business because of the cash issues that they were running into. So they were kind of this hybrid of a nonprofit, but had to act like a for-profit business. So they had to make sure they realized we need the right people in the right seats. We need to work on our execution, and then we need to become fiscally sound. Because that was their big short leg at the end of the day. So when we started, the early stages were tough because they had, directors of all these functions, but when they met, a learning center was vastly different than temporary housing, and they were all in their silos. And so they said when we met, we didn't know what to talk about. So we had to kind of break down those silos and say, well, what as a whole organization do we need to focus on? So it's getting the right, it was a lot of execution disciplines. They started doing daily huddles. They started having weekly meetings with a set agenda about what everybody was going to bring to that meeting. We had monthly meetings, quarterly meetings. They even had a 2-day offsite planning meeting that they'd never done before. So all the execution disciplines really help to focus on what they should be focusing on. The other thing they did was on the people end, they didn't have scorecards, and they didn't have priorities either. So we used a lot of the tools that we talked about here with, let's get scorecards for all the leadership team and make sure everybody knows what metrics and outcomes they're responsible for. Let's make sure everybody knows what the priorities are and talk about what those are, and so that we can move the needle forward here. And one of the priorities was pay off our debt, pay it off, and build that 2 to 3 months of operating expenses. As of today, they have say they've paid off all their debt, which is amazing to me, and it's been about 1.5 years. And they're about 40 days of operating expenses out of 90, because they said we need 90 days operating expenses, and they have socked that away. And they said they were like, it's incredible because we actually have the cash to pay our payroll without worrying about it. We know where the organization is headed, like strategically, and we have the right people now, because there was some turnover on getting the right people to be able to move the organization forward with all of this. And I think their meeting rhythms were a driving force to kind of get this done. So that's just another, it's like the power of these tools and the power of scaling up with the tools. If you implement them and stay at it, the dramatic effect it can have on the organization. So just another story.
So as you listen to the stories, because I think, again, as I said, stories can really have a fairly big impact when we listen to other people's stories. What's your takeaway? We're just curious, like, what have you heard in the stories of these two scaling up organizations? And if you could just, again, put it in the chat, what's your one takeaway of facing the challenges that they've had? And then last one, people key, it's possible.
It is.
Stacy, great session.
People were key. Yeah.
All right. Hank, what's your takeaway? Just curious. All right. Awesome. People were key.
Yeah.
Yes, practical with some elbow grease. Yeah. Yeah, this isn't a silver bullet. I mean, I think it's important to emphasize that, scaling up is an amazing system, but there isn't necessarily a fairy godmother or a magic wand or a silver bullet. It does actually take discipline. And it does require that you actually commit time up front.
Yeah.
And it's one of the reasons why only 4% of companies make it to $1 million in revenue, and only another 4% of those companies make it to 10 million, no matter who you are. So based on how difficult it is, it's one of the reasons that we've come up, not just with webinars like this, but also with additional tools to try and help you. There is the scaling up roadmap and the one-page strategic plan. So again, you'll be getting copies of the resources. The one-page strategic plan is really 2 pages when you print it out, but it talks about the core, it talks about the strategy, the strategic elements that will drive your top line revenue, as well as execution and your priorities and your critical numbers and your themes and your key performance indicators. There is a roadmap, a scaling up roadmap that actually takes you through each of these parts of the one-page strategic plan that you can actually download again off of CEO Think Tank's website. So if you want to use the opportunity over the next few weeks or going into 2022, maybe make it a scaling up year where you work with your team or work with yourself to go back and address each of these things, you can certainly do that. I mean, from our standpoint, there are basically 2 options, maybe a third option. You can certainly self-implement. As Jill said earlier, this material is all available online. The 4 decisions, the barriers to growth, the scaling up roadmap. You can get a copy of scaling up and take yourself through. You can engage with a certified coach. Scaling up coach, you could consider joining our CEO think tank community and learning from other leaders who are using this system. Or, third, you can say, you know what, I'm doing okay. I can muddle along, or I'm doing really great. And I've got one or two things coming away from this that I need to focus on, but I'm good. So again, to self-implement, go to the Scaling Up website, buy the book. We'll send you a link to everything ahead of time so that you can get yourself prepared. If you're interested in having a conversation, we are happy to have a 45-minute call with you all. We said we'd offer that to 3 folks, so there's 3 folks on the call. At this point, we're happy to do that unless Stacy or Hattie reaches out. Happy to give you a complimentary ticket to come and see Greg and meet our community as well we want to just say thank you for taking the time with us today. And finally, we wanted to make sure that we had time for Q&A. So Jill, it looks like we've got a few minutes left.
Yeah.
You guys want to take yourself off mute and ask questions? We've got a few minutes. What questions do you have at this particular juncture? Yeah, it's practical. Joe or Karen or Hank, any additional questions that we can answer for you?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I don't think I have any questions. I just did want to say thank you. I appreciate this. Always, you guys are always a really good reset for me, right? Make me think about my priorities. And I've been away I'm actually on vacation in Florida at my Florida home and managed to get COVID for a second time. So I'm okay, doing great actually. But I was kind of trapped here today, and I'm thinking about going back to work next week and thinking about all the things I needed to do. And I'm like, okay, I need to figure out what my priorities are. So this has been a big help today.
Good.
And I would definitely like to take you up on the 45-minute consult and just maybe talk a little bit about the coaching aspect. I think that would probably be helpful for me.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Absolutely. Thank you. Well, I hope you feel better, and I hope it's not a really bad case of COVID.
No, I'm much better today, and I'm actually doing well. So doing very well. Other than no contact with anyone for 10 days, right?
Gosh.
So yeah, my wife was on a trip away from here, so luckily she's been staying with her mom. She doesn't get to come to the Florida house. So
Yeah.
great vacation. but as you can see, I'm trying to make the most of it. So
Yeah, exactly. Oh.
So anyway, thank you again. I appreciate this.
You're welcome. Karen or Hank, additional questions that you might have?
Well, this was really good. So thank you very much to both of you. I think I want to sit with that scorecard for my capacity constrained roles first, and then I'm going to have probably a couple of questions that you guys can help me with.
Yeah, absolutely, Karen. Happy to give you resources. We've got lots of scorecard examples that we can share with you. And like I said, happy to sit down and just help you think through stuff.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Hank, how about you? Any additional questions or anything that we could assist you with? You're very welcome on the sharing. Like we said, we just want folks to be successful. Good. All right, cool. Well, thank you again for spending the time with us. We will get out this recording by Monday. Given that it's Friday today, we will get stuff out to you all by Monday, if that's all right. But in the meantime, just reach out to us. I think you've got our email and our information, and we can set up some time to chat with you sometime over the next few weeks. And allocate time. Allocate just an hour. Just pencil in an hour for next week and say, what am I going to really do, and what am I really going to commit to? Jill, any additional thing?
No, I think that sums it up. Thanks everyone for joining us today.
Yep. Have a great rest of your Friday, folks, and enjoy the weekend.
Thank you, ladies.
All right.
Bye.
Feel better, Joe.
Thank you. Bye.